We need bold strokes in a number of areas, and I want to highlight two today. One, the goal of creating in Europe a single low-carbon energy market, guaranteeing Europe's long-term energy security and leading the fight against climate change. And secondly, a Europe prepared to speak with a strong voice internationally so that it can engage the main global powers, the US, China, India, Russia and Brazil, and assert European interests and values in a strategic way in those discussions. Let me start with the European model that we are trying to defend and advance. There isn't time today for a detailed history lesson, but the twin foundations of Europe's success, first of all, I'm very conscious in Western Europe and then across Europe, have been a commitment to the social market economy and to liberal politics. The insistence first that market dynamism and human values are partners. The commitment second, not just to civil, political and social rights spread across our continent, but to the resolution of conflict through political dialogue. Yet today, I think it's striking that for the first time since the collapse of communism, people talk about capitalism in crisis. We have a new kind of economic and political challenge. The global recession is testing our ability to combine open markets with the public interest in social and environmental welfare. And it seems to me there are two dangers that we have to avoid. One is denial about the scale of the problem, and the second is quack remedies, from protectionism to save jobs to Euroscepticism to revive faith in politics. Both would, in my view, actually compound the problem that they are trying to address, the powerlessness that people feel, and they would do so in a way that is dangerous. My view is that the unquestionable insecurities, inequalities, unsustainabilities of today's globalized economy will not be addressed by what our Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, has decried as de-globalization. They will require instead a different kind of globalization, where political institutions are able to establish rules of the game that protect the public interest. And there are two examples that were agreed by the European Council last week: the Rule Book for Financial Regulation and Cooperation on Supervision, to ensure we keep pace with the increased dynamism of financial markets. That's one example. Solidarity in helping those in most difficulty, for example, through the EU Balance of Payments facility, is another. And what I want to suggest today is that enlargement is part of this equation that joins the social market economy to liberal politics. It's part of the deepening of liberal politics to argue for enlargement of the European Union. And the truth is that the success of the single market has been both the cause and the consequence of Europe's greatest success, enlargement to the east, including Poland. Joining the world's largest single market has attracted countries towards Europe. Each successive enlargement has in turn strengthened the single market, benefiting existing members as much as new members. And that's why the UK has always been at the forefront of this argument. Not to weaken or dilute the European Union, but actually to make it broader and stronger. But I'm conscious that we have to remake the case today, because there is plenty of calls for us to close the door after Croatia. There are social strains that need to be managed. There are conditions that need to be met for enlargement to be pursued. But I think that the economic and security arguments for enlargement remain as strong as ever. Our first priority in taking forward enlargement is to stick to the commitments we've made to Turkey and to the Western Balkans. It's vital to our credibility and cohesion that the EU keeps its side of the bargain. And beyond those already on the road to membership, we need to deepen cooperation and incentivize reform. I went to Kiev last summer to remind people that Article 49 of the EU Treaty gives all European countries the right to apply for membership. And in my view, Ukraine is most certainly a European country. Of course, not all the countries on our borders want to join, and that's why the UK was proud to support the Swedish-Polish initiative, the Eastern Partnership, not as an alternative to EU membership, but as an opportunity to expand the single market step by step in areas such as trade, investment and energy, and we have to make it real and strong. So there are two great projects of Europe's past, the single market and enlargement, that need to be protected and extended. But Europe's raison d'etre has to address new insecurities, and that's where I want to focus in two areas. One, energy, and second, foreign policy. Before I do so, I don't know if, how formal is the demosEUROPA, but I think if I stand here with my jacket for the next 15 minutes, there won't be much of me left. So, I think there'll be a certain sense of irony when I say I came to Warsaw and I boiled. It's not the immediate, people have more of a sense of Warsaw in the snow rather than Warsaw in the heat, but thank you for your informality. First, let me look at energy. The EU, which I know is a big issue here, the EU is becoming more and more dependent on imports from unstable or unreliable regions of the world. By 2030, we will import 84% of our gas, up from just over half today. 93% of our oil compared to 82% today. At the same time, global demand for energy is predicted to rise by 45%, raising the prospect of a global energy crunch, with demand pushing up prices and supply becoming increasingly insecure and politically contested. In January, we saw how the dispute between Russia and Ukraine left Bulgaria and other parts of Europe without gas for 2 weeks. This wasn't a one-off problem, and certainly not one that individual countries can solve on their own. The truth is that unless the EU develops a much more robust energy policy, we face a real crisis. Energy prices will rise to dampen economic growth, and there is a major risk of energy shortages. It seems to me there are 4 things we need to do if we want to avoid this scenario. First, we have to regulate to make our homes and industries more efficient, reducing our overall demand for energy. If the US, China, India and Russia had the same energy efficiency as Japan, world energy consumption would be cut by about 20%. Improvements in the EU's energy efficiency over the 10 years to 2006 saved the energy equivalent to 1/3 of the EU's total crude oil imports every year. That's why Europe's member states are working towards achieving the target of 20% more energy efficiency by 2020. But actually, if you look at the record over the last 10 years, that is not at the high end of ambition. Even if we just meet the target that we've set, we'll save the energy equivalent of 500,000 wind turbines. So energy efficiency, step 1. Step 2, diversifying our energy supplies. This requires more investment in the development of new energy sources, wind, tidal, solar, but also nuclear power. It requires investment in carbon capture and storage, so that countries like Poland and the UK can continue to use coal, but avoid its emissions impact. We also need more diversity in the source of gas supply and transit routes, which is why we strongly support the development of a so-called southern corridor, an important part of which is the Nabucco pipeline. Third, we need a second wave of electrification of our economies. By shifting to electric-powered cars and electric heating of our homes, we can reduce our dependence on imported oil and gas in favour of cleaner alternatives. And fourth, and critically, we need more solidarity between member states. The best way to achieve this in the energy field is through fully liberalised, transparent and integrated energy markets. The third package of energy legislation, which was recently agreed, has a critical role to play. It should lay the foundations for a real increase in interconnections across Europe, but in the short term we need to prepare better to avoid energy shortfalls. The Commission are coming forward with proposals. Some of it is about national action to do with storage facilities, but the EU needs a more integrated approach to emergency planning. I think it's really important to say that this is not only a path to greater energy security, it's also a path away from dangerous climate change, which I believe is the biggest long-term security threat that any of us face. Energy security and tackling climate change are two sides of the same coin. And by ensuring the EU budget addresses these two great security challenges, we can ensure much greater solidarity and both secure and clean our energy supply for generations to come.